Hey there, this is Angela. Welcome or welcome back. Seems like a very long minute since the last time I came to you guys with a garden update. So that's what today's episode's gonna be. There's been a lot happening and everything's looking great, so stick around. Since we have had a couple of really long-ish periods of heavy rain this spring and early summer, I quickly came to the conclusion that my straw mulch method for my walkways was not going to suffice this year. Usually it'll hold up for a while and keep the pathways kind of dry, but it's just failing this year. It didn't really stand a chance. I'm not sure if the camera shows how bad the mud is right here, but the straw is degrading and it's getting like kind of pushed down into the mud. You can see, maybe you can see like the depression there from walking. I'm trying to avoid those really low-lying spots, but it's getting harder and harder. So we broke down and ordered in a bunch of mulch. Five cubic yards of shredded hardwood mulch. The guy just dropped it off earlier today. Man, that is a lot of mulch. So I'm excited. I'll use this in the veggie garden for the pathways like I've talked about, but also we have some landscaped beds around the place that I will put this in. So yeah, I'm gonna be working on this pile for days. That's okay, it's gonna make like all the difference. In addition to getting our extra big load of mulch in and trying to get that all spread out, which I've made pretty good progress. There's still a pretty sizable pile left over in the driveway, but you can kind of see where I've spread it all out. At some point when I'm all finished, I might have like a pretty good before and after photo to show. So yeah, it's looking really good. It's pretty manual. I have to shovel in each load into our dump cart and wheel it over and then dump it out, spread it around. It's not too bad, just takes a little while. But everything's looking really good. Kind of go around and show you how everything is doing. Got so many things in pots this year, which is, I've never really done that in years past. This big plant here is a ground cherry. My first year growing those, and they're pretty good. Hang on, I'll take you guys in for a closer look. So these ground cherries, they grow in, they're little, I guess technically they're considered a fruit, like a tomato is technically, and they grow in these husks, and they're just little round, almost like berries. Whoops, I just knocked one off. But that's good because you know that they're ready to eat when they fall off. Otherwise, they're not ripe. And I've heard that they're very tart or sour, and they might not even be very healthy for you to eat until they're completely ripe from what I've been reading. So you wait till they fall off and then gather them. I would check, what I've been doing is checking every day because I don't want a critter to get my ground cherries, but they're pretty good. They're really sweet. This variety is called Aunt Molly's, and we think it tastes kind of, it has like an apple-ish flavor to it, which it's very interesting. I've never tasted anything quite like it. But each plant, I've got 3 plants total, this one here and then 2 over on the other side of the house. Apparently they're prolific as far as the number of fruits they produce. I don't know if you can see all the ones on there. Yeah, I mean, it's early in the season and they're already producing, so that's great. And I've got a bunch of other things in pots. This is actually 2 squash plants that I'm gonna have to thin that out because they both can't share this one smallish pot. This is black cumin. I'm growing that for the first time, mainly to harvest the seeds. They're pretty nutritious from what I've read, and I've bought them before and added them to my smoothies and such. Got some cosmos started in there. And what I've been doing with all these pots is getting things started in here because they're a little more protected. I can keep an eye on them a little better and nurture them until they're big enough. And then I'm transplanting them when they get to a certain size. So for instance, this is Siam Queen basil. It's ready to be split off. So I'll branch those off and put them into spaces here and there in the garden. And I've got a number of things in this bed. I've got some onions and beans. These are just bush beans. And then more squash trying to grow up along the other side there. And it seems like my squash is really struggling this year. Same with my cucumbers and melons. It's really interesting because usually those things are no fail as far as getting them to germinate and grow pretty big, but for some reason it's been a little problematic this year. Tomatoes are kind of floundering. This group here in the back, they've got a leaf spot issue going on, and I'm trying to take those leaves off, or those shoots off with the leaf spot as I see them, but I think it's a tricky game. You have to be careful because you can't take too much foliage off. I've read that you can take up to 1/3 off of a plant without harming it. And I do have tomatoes on, some little cherry tomatoes there, but I think that these tomatoes are not going to maybe not even be long for this world if they even produce at all, which is too bad. And even more so than losing a tomato harvest this year is that now I'm wondering if I won't be able to grow tomatoes again in these grow bags. So if that's the case, I'll have to repurpose those bags and maybe grow beans or something else in them. And I think maybe there would be a period of time that I'd have to wait before I could try to grow tomatoes again. I just don't relish the thought of having to get rid of all that soil in there because soil's expensive. And I've got a mixture of things in this bed here. This is my bed with the big tall trellis. And this is white borage, which will bring in a lot of pollinators. Got some beets. That is Kajari melons right there. And again, I was having trouble getting them to germinate. So for the 3rd time I put seeds in, I just put a bunch of seeds in there because I have a bunch that I saved. Those are all from seeds saved last year from a melon. And of course, now you can see that a lot of them germinated. It'll have to be thinned out. Then I've got a few more bean plants. And then over there in the far corner, I've got another type of melon called Golden Jenny. So same with that. That's why there's so many little seedlings. I was getting frustrated, so I just threw a handful of seeds in for the 3rd time sowing, trying to get them to germinate, and finally success. My hops plants are loving it. Took a little while to get over the transplant shock, but they're loving it now. This one here is making its way pretty close to the top. That's what they need to thrive, is something to climb on. And I've got some wildflowers growing up in this small pot. I had so many of those, they're about a gallon size black pots, that the ones with flowers, I kind of just setting on the corners of my raised beds there. And once they get their flowers, it'll bring in some pollinating action. In my larger grow bags, I've got corn. The corn's doing really well. A couple of them have started to develop the silks, which will, I guess, turn into ears of corn. I've grown corn a couple of times, but I would say that I'm still pretty much a novice, but they're starting to develop, so that's good. And then intermixed in, I've got some grow bags with sunflowers. And I did have these, I'm gonna back up to give you guys more of a lay of the land. So I did have the bags more spread out, just for ease of me being able to get in and amongst them to tend to the plants. But I did have some deer action, and they chomped a couple of my sunflowers down like pretty hard. I'll show you. Here's right there, there. So, and then a couple of the other grow bags, they did the same thing to the sunflowers. So what I did was to move all of the sunflowers. I kind of like brought them all in closer to the larger garden here, and then kind of did a perimeter surrounding it with the grow bags of corn. And so I know that's going to leave the corn a little bit vulnerable once it develops its ears, but what I'm planning to do, since I've got all the corn in these cages, well, the deer pretty much don't like these cages, and they have tended over the years to leave things alone in there. But then we also have had squirrels get into our corn before. So what my plan is, once these start developing their ears, is to wrap each, like the circumference of the cage with netting. I know it's a lot of work, but you got to get creative, especially if you have heavy wildlife pressure. So that's my best idea for now, at least. My poor cabbage bed. I've only got 3 cabbage plants that are still kind of struggling along, but they might actually turn into something. There's one there that's kind of developing, I guess, a little head on it, and there's my other larger one, and this third one is smaller. So my feeling is that even if I don't harvest any heads of cabbage this year, this is better than I've ever done in the past as far as getting them to this stage. And I will call it a success. And next year I'll start out on even better of a footing, knowing what I need to put into place to protect them and get them to grow. And I've got a bunch of onions in this bed that seem to be doing pretty well. And then down there at the end, those 2 larger plants are more borage plants. I keep hearing so many good things about borage, how no garden should be without it because it attracts all the pollinating insects. And I'll show you here in a minute, I do have a plant that's flowering already, and that's true. It's always covered with little tiny, I guess there's bees. And in my garlic bed, those are going to be probably ready to harvest soon. I did cut the scapes off, and I made some really good pesto out of it. It's so good, I can't keep my hands out of it. And I've got radishes and beets in there. My carrots, once again, failed. I might not try carrots ever again. That's frustrating. And then my pepper bed is doing pretty good now that I've got reduced the slug pressure, which was damaging the foliage, and I've got a lot of peppers on now. There's a couple there. Those are Hungarian hot wax. These are lively. I don't know if we can see. Let me raise this. Hang on. So I would say that a good portion of the plants have peppers on. These are some serrano peppers. This is a bell pepper, King Crimson. And this is a Hungarian hot wax. I have a couple of those plants, at least 2, maybe 3. I've got a few cayenne pepper plants. Those always do well. Those are almost no fail for me as far as peppers go. This is another Hungarian hot wax. My first year growing these, and they seem to be doing really well, so that'll probably be a keeper. And then this plant is called Lively Italian. And then there's a bunch more peppers on the other side. Back to the other row of beds. My leafy greens bed is about done for. I'm still harvesting lettuce and kale almost every day. And I do also have onions growing in here. But the weeds have really taken over, and I'm not sure what to attribute that to, because that's not the case in really any of my other beds. So what I'm planning to do, this week I should end up harvesting the rest of all these lettuces and the kales. And I'm just gonna cover the whole bed with cardboard and hardwood mulch to kind of squash down the weed pressure. And then I'll end up re-sowing a little bit later this summer. I might just do leafy greens in there again. And once again, I've got a lot of things in pots. It's just working out for me this year to do it that way. Most of these things are herbs or flowers that I'll then move around. And thankfully, my other grouping of tomato plants up here in the front is doing much better. So they do get more sun here. And this is all, it's fresh soil, brand new grow bags. The only things that aren't new in here are the shredded leaves. So I'm kind of a little bit wondering if that's where the leaf spot came from. I'm not sure, but I'm not noticing it as much here. I'm seeing a little bit of it here and there. And I don't know if that's just something that's unavoidable. I don't know, it seems like it should be avoidable. I just really hate the thought of having to ditch all this soil. So for next year's garden, I might have to rethink how I'm doing it and find just a brand new spot for the tomatoes. These two planters here are flowers. They're called Jasmine Scented Nicotiana. And I'll try to get up close. This one's kind of wilty now. But they're white flowers, slightly off-white, but they smell so nice. They're really touted highly for their fragrance, and they have not disappointed. The scent of the flowers is so nice. I haven't really seen them draw too many insects or pollinators, but I don't care. I think I'm gonna keep growing these every year just because the fragrance is so nice. And I'm gonna take you back around. I got maybe a couple more things to show. This is my dill, two dill plants that I have been harvesting. I ended up kind of pruning that one down hard, and it's already developing new shoots. Dill's such a strong herb. I don't know like that anyone would ever need more than 1 or 2 plants unless you really like dill or you were doing maybe a lot of pickling. But I want to show you the other borage plant. Well, there's 2 plants in this pot. So it's already flowering, pretty prolific flowers. And normally I see a lot of insects buzzing over here. I don't know if you can see like tiny little bees. Of course, it's not prolific now and I'm going to show it to somebody, but I do see a couple buzzing around. They're just a little bit hard to focus on the camera. But yeah, it's drawing in some action there. So that's pretty much how my big garden is going. I'm really thrilled that everything's doing so well, even despite the weather issues that we've had. The cold spring lasted so long, and then it started to get warm and we had a cold snap and a pretty late frost for us. I think like a lot of the country did, at least in the Midwest and then the upper South. And then we've had a lot of rain this summer. There have been periods where it rained for 3 days straight, and I am finding that my hardwood mulch that I'm laying out has solved that problem. So this is probably what I'll just stick to rather than try to use the straw. The straw did not hold up well for me this year. It decayed quickly, and with all the rainy periods that we've had, the whole garden would just end up becoming like a swampy mess. It wasn't any fun to work in. So, but the mulch is doing well. I've got, about a 3-inch layer down, give or take. Oh yeah, my pumpkins. So these are called Owl's Eye. I'm just happy that they have sprouted, some of them. This one's called Jack Straw. This one is Fairy Tale. And these ones here, which are doing better than any of them, are just some seeds that I saved from a surprise pumpkin that popped up the last couple of years. The other 4 varieties have not yet germinated, so I might try resowing those. I think for some of these things that I had issues with them not germinating, I should have waited a little longer. It just wasn't hot enough. That's my thought, at least. I feel like things are finally starting to look pretty good and get under some state of control. Although by the time August comes, it'll all be like crazy out of control. There comes a point at which everything just goes wild, and then there's only so much you can do to just maintain it at that point, but that's kind of part of the fun of it. So that's all I have. So hopefully it won't be too long in between next time, but at least I had a bunch of stuff to show you guys this time. Sometimes it pays just to wait for a while, and there'll be a lot more interesting content. So I hope you guys' garden is growing great, and thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And until next time, this is Angela signing off with a friendly reminder to get out there and play in the dirt.